Hi everybody, it's Alex from Asian Boss. Did you know that there are over 150,000 Americans living here in South Korea? That's more than 3 times the number of Americans that are living in Japan. And that number may surprise you, considering that North Korea is only an hour away from Seoul, the capital of South Korea. As an American myself, I wanted to find other Americans and ask them why they are living here in South Korea and why they are choosing to stay as well. So let's go find some Americans and find out. So quick introduction, where are you from and how long have you been in Korea?
My name's Asha. I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and I've lived in Korea for 4 years now.
My name's Kevin. I'm from America, North Carolina. I've been here since 2013.
My name is Cameron. I'm from Arkansas in the United States, and I've been in Korea for 5.5 years now.
I've been here for 2 years now. I'm originally from Virginia, a really tiny town, so this is like a big difference for me.
I was born in Missouri, but I most recently came from Maryland. I've been here off and on for 10 years.
What brought you to Korea the first time?
A big airplane, Oceana. No, I came here because I wanted to teach English. Back in 2009, things were a lot different, I think. Korea was more mysterious, I guess. So, I don't know, I just wanted something different, and the economy was tanking. My job was kind of not doing so well, so.
To be honest, I was a kindergarten teacher back in New York City, and New York City does not pay that well, contrary to my beliefs.
I got a job as a researcher at a local university trying to raise awareness for people with disabilities. My professor's a quadriplegic, and 9.5 years ago, disability issues weren't really in the forefront of Korean society, so we tried to raise awareness for that.
Yep, and my story is less interesting. He brought me here. I was just finishing up grad school at the time in linguistics, and I was an English teacher by trade, so I figured whether I taught English in the place I had planned to or here, it didn't matter much.
Now you've been here for a little bit. Do you consider yourself an expat or an immigrant?
I want to say expat moving into immigration. My husband's Korean, so I do want to have a future here and live here permanently. That's my goal.
I'd have to say more of an expat because I was born in the U.S. and don't really see myself staying here permanently. But that really depends on my wife because she was born here in Korea, and if it's up to her, she would prefer to stay here, in which case I'd be an immigrant. But at least for now, I would see myself as an expat.
Can you tell us a little bit about the work that you do right now in Korea?
So I work at a immersion school, so I have students who are half Korean and half something else. Their English is basically pretty good, but they're in that in-between stage where they're not good enough to be in Korean schools, and they're also their parents don't want to pay for international schools for whatever reason. So I have been working there for a few years now. It's very nice. My kids are really funny.
Right now, I work mostly in the English education content industry. So I do some things online, in TV and radio, geared mainly towards young children, elementary age, and different kind of English textbooks, English language videos for Korean children learning English.
Did you find any difficulties getting your jobs or any visa issues that you've had to deal with when seeking employment?
Yes, there are several of those. I had to do a lot of things for the visa process before I even got over here, background checks and things of that nature, interviews to make sure that I was an upright citizen, that there was nothing wrong. So that took time, but it was more just about jumping through the hoops.
My employment process took about 6 months for all the visas and everything to go through, and I came here to work at a university, so I worked as a researcher, and the funding eventually kind of dwindled for that, and then I transitioned to a student. And I can say that the visa process has always been incredibly difficult and stressful, and it's made life rather hard to stay here. And actually kind of related to that is part of the reason why we're going to be heading home in the near future.
Because of the difficulty in renewing the visa?
Well, it's one factor. You have, if it was only the visa, we'd be here. But if the visa was easier, I would have maybe looked for a different job or position or things like that.
Before you came to Korea, did you have any opinions about the country or any expectations about the country?
Well, the first time I came, I knew about Korea. I was a child, even though I was in the U.S. Army.
I didn't really have too many opinions. I thought the people living here were just normal humans for the most part. I'm not one of those K-pop or K-drama fans. Life just interfered, and I ended up getting mixed up coming here.
That time in 2008, when I started researching, everything was different, right? There weren't a million Instagram and YouTube accounts and blogs of people's experiences here. So it was kind of like coming to a really foreign country. So what were my expectations? I don't know. I thought there was going to be a lot of barbecue and a lot of soju, and I guess that's kind of true. But I guess I expected things to not be as modern. I think people's image still existed from right after the war. My dad was actually here back in the 90s as part of the U.S. Army, and that was kind of his experience. South Korea was just not developed at that time. So I think that was kind of the image that still lingers in a lot of people's mind until more recently when, YouTube and K-pop and all that stuff started to really make a bigger name for it.
I have a kind of funny story about that, because one of my misconceptions about Korea was that people don't speak English. Because in Japan, even if you go to Tokyo, people really don't speak English there. You have to sort of gesture and make effort to communicate. Here in Seoul, I hadn't realized how different it was until one day when I went to a local coffee shop, and I went into the coffee shop assuming that nobody spoke English. I didn't speak any Korean at the time yet, though. So I went in and I was like, coffee, large, 1. And the person there gave me the most perfect side eye I've ever seen and just says, "Do you want cream or sugar with that?" In perfect English. I never felt so small in my life.
Now, how did you feel about the safety of coming to South Korea?
With the preponderance of CCTV cameras everywhere, I think the crime rates in Korea are pretty low compared to those in the U.S. So you do see a lot of people out late at night, and it's not really a big deal, especially as a woman.
The biggest thing that I really like is I don't have any worries about, gun safety here. Gun violence, anything like that. I mean, coming from Chicago, obviously, it's stereotypically a city that's kind of known for gun violence. But here it's not like that. I never worry about walking into a place and having to look for 2 exits just in case. And at my school, I'm never worried. And that's the biggest relief.
I feel guilty. I had that kind of preconceived notion about North Korea, and I also have a Dominican mother who's very paranoid. So the minute she found out I was moving, every day she's showing me an article. She's like, "Guess what they're doing with the bombs? Something's happening. You're still gonna go? You're still gonna go?" And I'm just like, but once I got here and I realized that no one else was worried about it, I'm like, okay, I think I'm good.
My family was a little worried. A couple times they were shooting missiles in the Sea of Japan. But for the most part, I was not worried at all. A lot of civilians watch the news and get really worried, whereas me being here, boots on the ground, I had no fears at all whatsoever.
Do you think a lot of Americans get any information about North Korea from sources other than the news?
A lot of Americans, there's something wrong with our education system. Some people can't point Korea out on a map. They know nothing about either country. So I don't even know if they watch news. I don't know what they do.
Have you ever met a North Korean person directly?
Yes, I have. I actually worked with a school that they specialize in training North Koreans and having them prepared to integrate into society. Anyone in the world, when you meet them face to face, any prejudice you might have had or thought beforehand, those kind of get melted away by actually experiencing how they are, not how the media portrays them or how, you hear stories about them. So I think living in Korea, I've been exposed to more of that, and I've definitely changed my opinion on how severe things are over there and how much I care, because I really do care about them and what they go through, yeah.
The first time I met North Koreans was in Northeast China about 20-some years ago, a little over 20 years ago, and then North Koreans who came to the U.S. who came to raise awareness about conditions in North Korea. So yeah, they've been just really eye-opening experiences, just because it's not every day that you get to meet North Koreans. And I do have a personal interest in North Korean issues because my maternal ancestors are originally from what is now North Korea. Obviously wasn't North Korea at the time they lived there, but yeah, so I do have a personal stake, I think, in the well-being of seeing, I want to see North Koreans, have experienced the freedoms that the rest of the world does.
What would you consider the biggest challenge that you face as an American in South Korea?
Because I am constantly identified as an American, before I'm even sometimes identified as a human being, that has a lot of different implications for interpersonal relationships. You know, when you meet someone new, the first thing they're going to see that you're, well, in my case, a Caucasian American, they're going to make assumptions on that, which may or may not be true. A lot of my mental bandwidth spent either trying to prove to people that I don't fit into all stereotypes that they have, and also whenever I do something that may be considered stereotypically, I can definitely feel a little guilty about it sometimes, like, ah, man, I'm not American. Every time I eat McDonald's here in Korea, I feel like I'm playing into people's stereotypes.
There are definitely challenges, like finding jobs, integrating into society, making friends. I'd say making friends is probably the biggest challenge. Making long-term friends outside of the occasional person who wants to learn English.
Have you noticed any difficulties that involve discrimination based on the color of your skin in South Korea?
I have. I've been denied entry into some bars, but I think a lot of that is the Koreans are sometimes uncomfortable speaking English, and so when they see a foreigner, they assume that we don't speak Korean.
Do you think that's different than any discrimination you might experience back in the States?
It is. I don't fear for my safety when I'm discriminated against here. Like, no one's going to shoot me or something, so it's just I can just walk away and go to another bar. It's not pleasant, but I think a lot of the discrimination comes out of more ignorance than like hatred.
Here, I get asked a lot if I can dance really well, because they're like, yeah, like I've seen like black girls on TV, black girls can dance, and I'm like, ooh, is that what you think? I'm about to embarrass my entire race. Ooh. And then another thing is like, they have this kind of positive stereotype that all black people can sing really well, and I'm like, again, here I go embarrassing my entire family line, because it's not. Compared to America, I feel like they don't have those kind of negative stereotypes here towards black people. I think sometimes it can be like they have this one stereotype where black people can be very aggressive, and I think it kind of instills this like fear in people here sometimes. But usually, like compared to American stereotypes, obviously like black people are like dangerous, all these terrible things about us. Like I feel like compared to those, you telling me that I should be able to sing and I sing really well just because I'm black it's not that bad.
Are you familiar with the stereotype that a lot of the Americans here, they're just English teachers, low-paying jobs, and they couldn't make it back in the States? Are you aware of that?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
For years, whenever we would meet new people, he would introduce himself as, "Hey, I'm Eric, not an English teacher, not with the military."
Yeah, I want a t-shirt that just says, "Not an English teacher, not with the military." I'm very, very aware that people will assume you're an English teacher.
Absolutely. We call it LBH, loser back home. It's a person who doesn't have any marketable skills or any type of personable skills, so they come here to pick up women or men, I guess, and just get a low-paying job teaching ABCs at whatever academy. So this stereotype absolutely does exist. Is it true? Yeah, to some extent. Not everybody, but it absolutely is true. You see people who are fresh out of university who are here to, get drunk and, meet people and travel around. They don't care about their job. So, but is that the majority of people? And I would absolutely say it's not. I think most people who are here to teach are trying their best to make an honest living and to help, people.
How do you think Korea has changed since you've been here?
It's changed a whole lot, especially since 05 and 06. 05 and 06, Koreans were actually still a little scared of foreigners. They'd freak out when you spoke anything to them. 2013, when I got back, things changed, and here in 2020, living in Seoul, people just ignore me now as being a foreigner is no big deal.
Culturally, people, especially university students and other younger people, they're more willing to speak out, either against sexual harassment, worker safety conditions, and other things that affect their day-to-day lives, because generally speaking, younger people have less tolerance and patience for those types of things. If they see something wrong, they'll go on social media, file a complaint with a government agency or wherever to tell their side of the story, because they feel like they don't have to put up with stuff like that anymore compared to decades past.
Has your perspective as an American changed by coming and living here?
I think so. My perspective of the world has definitely changed. The world is a lot bigger than America. And I would really encourage anyone, especially if you're young, even if you're old, to travel. Doesn't matter what country. You know, Korea is a great choice, but really being able to experience another culture and have your horizon broaden, like that's so important. And I really encourage it. I want to bring my little brother over here because I really want him to be able to experience something new and something else.
Like when I look at things that are like things that I used to have very strong feelings about in America, I look at from a little bit more of a distance now, and I'm able to kind of separate myself from a lot of like issues and look at it as an outsider. So this ability to step out of the system, be a lot more critical and objective when I kind of evaluate things that I'm considering back home.
Just when I compare the two cultures before I came to Korea to stay here, I think I highly valued, just the classic sense of American just individualism that I had, just being able to go out, act however I want, just not worrying about anybody's opinion, and kind of living for myself. And I always thought that was just the best worldview and way of life to have. But then I think coming to Korea, I really also learned to value just the benefits of realizing that you live in a community and just being mindful of other people and their desires. Even though it may feel restricting for a Westerner American, if you truly embrace that lifestyle and mentality, you can really develop some super strong relationships that could only be found in a culture like Korea.
A lot of what has opened my eyes is other people's perception of what is the USA. So some people think of it as this land of hope and, the romance and all that stuff the opportunity, the American dream. And you want to tell people, yeah, that's true. You can move to the States and you can become who you want to be. But at the same time, the longer I live here, the more I'm like, no, it's just a dream. It's not really going to happen for most people. So I think I feel more disappointed. It's kind of like you see the man behind the curtain, I think, living abroad, and you see that I think as children, we're really kind of brainwashed in a lot of ways. And I don't think I ever would have realized that or been so cynical unless I had spent a large amount of time outside of the country, and I'm going to be deported from my own country.
I think that's the first time I've ever heard an American say, I think we're brainwashed.
But I mean, really, when you think of the Pledge of Allegiance and you think of, we think of this flag as being, one nation under God. But at the same time, we'll eat, potato salad off this flag on the paper plate at the 4th of July. So really how great is it? And it's like we criticize other countries for being so proud of their country and their land and their people and their accomplishments. But at the same time, we always want to be America's number one. America's great. You're lucky if you can come to my country. And I've met so many Americans who think of themselves as very, the Korean people are fortunate because they get to talk to me as an American and I get to share my experiences with you. And it's really not the case. So I think as time has gone by, maybe it is just being cynical. Maybe the last 4 years have just really put a damper on my taste for the States.
If there was one thing that Americans don't know about South Korea that they haven't heard about in, let's say, mainstream media, what would that be? What would you want to tell Americans?
If they are associating North Korea with South Korea, like it being dangerous or something like that, and every time they reference danger in South Korea, it's always North Korea that they're kind of pointing the finger at. It's not a concern here at all for people. I mean, that's why I'm convinced it's sensationalized news headlines that are putting those ideas in people's heads, just because, life is so normal here. South Koreans, they're just I don't want to say they're just like Americans, but overall, yeah, we're all just people trying to do the best we can, going to work, going to school, advancements in technology. I would say that, stop looking at people as being from one country or another country and just start looking at them as people.
I know, obviously, living in America, there's just this whole, Korean drama, K-pop, BTS, whatever, pop culture phase that's going on. And, people kind of romanticize that and fantasize that when they imagine living in Korea, but I just want to tell everyone who has that mindset of that being the reason why they want to come here, just to throw that out the window, because it's pretty useless. Like, that's not what Korea's like at all. If you want to truly just live your best life here, you're just going to have to put in the work to embrace just the everyday culture and learn the language and find work to do, because that's how you can truly integrate as just a foreigner who wants to become as close as possible to a Korean citizen, not by just constantly consuming whatever like Western media presents to you about Korea.
Do you have any plans to go back to the United States, either to visit or to live soon?
I do have plans to go back to visit because I still have business in the United States to take care of. But I don't plan to live there. Obviously, it's a good fallback option if I need to go back to somewhere else, but I'd rather stay in Korea or go abroad to a different country than go back to the U.S.
No.
That was quick.
Yeah. Well, it comes for several different reasons. I found kind of a place here in South Korea that matches me well. That doesn't mean it matches me perfectly, but I've found a place where I'm happy with the good and able to deal with the not so good. I don't want to like throw that all the way just to go back home. And so, yeah, I think I'll be staying here at least as long as I can work and have a life. I don't think I would elect to leave unless some kind of outside pressure forced me to do so.
So I just had this conversation with my mom the other day because she's ready for me to move back home. If I'm still here when I'm 30 and I don't have a serious boyfriend, then I will pack up my stuff and go somewhere else. Because life living abroad can be very sad and very lonely. So I'm like, listen, if this is still empty come 3 years from now, I am gone. I'm out of here.
Well, I am 33 and it's still empty, so we'll see. Thank you so much for your time.